Welcome back to I Wasn't Prepared for This! Conroe ISD Student Support Services Department podcast.
We have a special guest today.
Oh, boy.
We are so lucky to be joined by Tricia Skyles.
Wow.
She is a leader in classroom management and behavior. We could go on and on about her bio, but we're going to cut it short with that. We want her to share how she ended up doing what she's doing. But first, we want to tell you why she is so impactful to each of us. So we'll get into education for different reasons, right? But let's have a little sentence starter just to share our little why we're giddy at the table real quick. So your sentence stem is I know I, and then you're going to share your sales pitch as to like, why are you giddy, or why are you here, or why do you find Tricia so interesting? As you said this morning.
With me? Well, she's
This
hilarious.
feels like a swipe right kind of thing that's happening
All right,
now.
Lindsay,
Right?
I know
The
I-
dating game. I am excited about Tricia. I know I am excited about Tricia because she validates all the things that I want her to say. But that's what you've been doing. But no, you're really knowledgeable, especially in the area that we work in. And I also... I never planned on being in education, and I've left it, and I've come back. I just really want to make a difference for kids, and I want them to enjoy being at school, and that's what's important to me. So that's why I'm here and excited about you.
Well, wow. I need you to write down this sentence prompt because I'm going to give it to my husband on
that's
Saturday
fun.
when
We'll
we're
come
out
and
on
take
our
it
date.
home.
I'll be like, why are you giddy about
Me.
being at this table with me.
great?
So we also have Lucy Kimple here. Lucy is on our team, Student Support Services, and this is her first time on the podcast, but we have a surprise. She'll be with us on every other future podcast. We are not going to tell you why right now. Just you'll have to hang till the end to find out. Lucy, I know I
am here. Well, why am I in education?
Or both.
I'm going to be real honest.
Yeah.
So I got a call from a superintendent to ask me if I wanted to interview to get a Spanish job. Fresh from college, and I decided, ooh, that means a new outfit. So I did.
She still lives by that philosophy.
I got a new outfit, and guess
my
what?
gosh.
26 years later, here I am, loving what I do. And that's why I'm excited that you're here. Because we can all learn something new from an expert.
All of us. That's, me
And I still
included.
believe in getting a new outfit.
I
Every
bet
time.
when you vacation, it's just, you're like, nah, nothing in my closet. I got to go full scale.
or do
Maybe.
you buy clothes on vacation?
Both.
Both.
I don't.
Thank you for asking. I know I got in education anyway just because I have always been like a learner. I think, I want to learn something. I think it's intriguing to watch people think and to wonder what they're thinking and to dig into it. So I can be a little much sometimes with probing questions and things, but I thought, well, I like learning. Let me just keep doing that, School forever. Sounds fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to be at the table with Tricia because I can learn a lot from her. Yeah.
No pressure now.
Yeah. So Tricia, I've heard you were a self-proclaimed tough kid yourself. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are then?
Oh, gosh. Well, my journey into education was completely dumb luck and accidental. Because I was a tough kid. They didn't call us tough kids at the time, right? I mean, there was no tiered services, and I grew up in a very small town, so, my life of crime started my first day of kindergarten.
Life of crime.
I mean, because I think one of my crowns rolled off the table, and my nemesis picked it up, and she broke it in two, and I thought, oh, is it like that? And I just took a swing. So I went to the office for punching a fellow classmate first day of school. I mean, that doesn't bode well for the rest of your education. And I just struggled with compliance, and but I was lucky because I didn't have any academic deficits, and it turns out they let a lot more deviance, right, slide when you're slightly charming and you can do all your work. So I did not want to return to education. I went to college and I went into drama. I was a theater major.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted to do. And, as all the optimism of an 18-year-old can have about, gosh, where was I going to put all my Oscars? And then I started dating a farmer.
Oh.
Yeah. And it turns out that farming and theater in the state of Kansas don't really go together. So literally I was like, what job can I have if I end up marrying this guy? And I switched to education. Because at the time, everybody was in education. I mean, when I first applied, and that was paper application. Some of y'all a bit young. I don't know if you remember. And you're like spraying perfume on it, like maybe they'll pick this one. Calling every day. Because there were like over 200 applicants for my job the first time I applied, right? It's a different world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know, I always tell people we used to get interviewed, but right now people are interviewing us. They're interviewing Conroe when they come in as much as you're interviewing them. So it's an interesting perspective. And then I got a middle school job, and I love middle school kids. And I would go back to a 7th grade classroom in a heartbeat, but I think I'd probably be fired immediately. Because if I was told to do something that wasn't best practice, I just probably wouldn't do it. I don't know.
Your deviance would come out.
My deviance is still there. So I went to a training by Jim Knight, and he said, hey, we've got this job called an instructional collaborator. That's what we were called at the time. And he goes, I think you should apply. So I applied for it, and I went down and I worked with the team, and then I went through the interview, not planning to take it. I was actually transitioning into a new role in the school I was in. And when I drove home from the interview, our landline, again, I hope I look younger.
I was like, you're really trying to age yourself right now, Tricia.
Landline rang. And I picked it up, and he said, the job's yours if you want it. And I said, great, I'll take it. And then I hung up, and my husband was like,
what else?
What just happened? I go, I don't know, but we got to move to Topeka, Kansas in the next 2 weeks. So we packed up our stuff, and I did this, and then we brought Randy Sprick in to do champs. And remember, I'm a secondary teacher. So as soon as I hear an acronym, I just immediately am, right? And I sat through a one-day training with Susan Isaacs, who many of you probably know. And at the end of the day, Jim said, what did you think? And I said, I think this is the dumbest thing you could have brought in. I go, this isn't going to work with our kids. I mean, we had kids that knew there was a 7-minute response time between the alarm being sounded and the police showing up on our campus. They'd break in windows and write disparaging comments on your, the whiteboards. They always used dry erase markers. So it was like, meh. But I said, this isn't built for them, because I didn't understand system design. That even for your kids who have the most challenges, the only way to address them well is to build a better system from the base up. And he goes, try a couple things with a couple teachers. I go, great, fine, out they went. And I tried a couple things with a teacher who told me she was quitting. So my whole plan, as a coach, what a terrible coach, I was going to work with her, and then she was going to quit, and then I could say what?
It didn't work.
See, I told you it didn't work.
Yeah.
And then it worked. It worked in spite of my efforts to see it. Like, I was sabotaging it on purpose.
And it still worked.
And it still worked.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking, what if I really went full scale? What if I really went through this, and I worked with a couple teachers, and we tried to figure out how to set up their classrooms for next year? And y'all, the epiphany that I had through that process, I was like, oh, the impact that behavior has on academics and academics has on behavior, they're intertwined. It's one curriculum. There's no separation between the two. I was like, I want to do this. So we did the first coaching book, and then I presented it at our Safe and Civil's National Conference, and Randy said, if there's anything I can do for you, and I go, yeah, I want a job.
Yeah.
So he called me a couple weeks later, and we figured out a job, and I'm in partnership, with Jim, but behavior is my love. Set up a system where kids can actively engage, where kids want to be, but also set up a system where staff want to be.
Yes.
Like, you can't take care of kids without taking care of staff, and we forget to set up those systems sometimes in a way that makes teachers just as successful.
Yes.
Right. So I learned a new word. from
gosh.
you this week,
Oh,
and
Lord.
it popped in my head, and I love words, so I'm just gonna say it. So
it.
all of Connor ISD can use this new word, amalgamation.
Oh yeah. Somebody should look that up. What if I'm?
I
what if I'm
did.
not? What
I
if I'm
did
not?
look it
What
up.
if I didn't use the word right? Like that would be
You
the
did.
worst. isn't
Tell
it?
me a little bit, because you mentioned it, and I just want to drive the point home before we continue our conversation. Tell me how behavior in academics is and should be an amalgamation.
Yeah. Okay, so we're so overwhelmed with the content we have to teach, and that's, problematic because the more content you have to teach. I mean, think about your high school history teachers. Okay, start at the beginning, but every day new history is made. It's very difficult to get through. So especially as kids get older, we're very, very content driven, but we don't think about this particular grade level or this particular class. What do they need to maximize the likelihood that they will engage in the content I'm giving them? There's a great quote out there from Pat somebody.
Right?
You'll
Sounds
find
great.
that from Berkeley.
Really impactful.
Well, I'm going to paraphrase it. It basically says if it weren't for kids, we could get a lot done. That's basically what it says. But the problem is, are the kids with us at the end of the year? If you plow through content, but all your kids are still back here, then it doesn't matter. You don't get rewarded for that, especially if one of the benchmarks you're using is, your big star testing. You have to get the kids with you. And so ideally, when you're sitting down on lesson planning, whether you use Madeline Hunter, the inventor of the lesson plan. Do you remember Madeline Hunter? Did everybody do Madeline? Anticipatory set? How am I going to engage them? However you're lesson planning, whether you're doing it mentally, whether you're doing it on paper, you have to think about, okay, I'm going to teach, I don't know, give me something people are teaching right now.
Fractions? You mean specific?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fractions. Why would you
Ratios
pick math?
I don't know. That's
terrible.
I don't math, so I don't math.
But here's the beauty of also being a coach. You don't have to be a master in
Right.
the craft because the teacher is the master in the craft.
Absolutely.
So you're just coming in and saying, how can I best support you? And if they're like, I'm not sure how to design my system for these kids. So let's say I'm a third grade teacher and I am in second semester and they're not on pace with reading. And I know that that's a critical place that they need to be. Or I am a high school math teacher and I am teaching maybe some remediation. And we know remedial math is so critical because 90% of high school dropouts failed algebra. It's not a causation, but it's certainly a plausible correlation, so it's critical. So I'm saying the kids are not with me. What are we going to do? Well, when I sit down and think I'm going to teach, this reading lesson or I'm going to teach fractions, the question should be, well, what instructional activities, what modes are you going to use? And so if I say, well, I'm going to use, direct instruction or lecture, whatever I want to call that at first, say, great. What does behavior need to look and sound like for the kids so that we can maximize the likelihood that 90% of the kids are with you 90% of the time, which seems like a high bar, but the idea is that different kids are
It's always going to be somebody at some point.
Always. We have about...
And we all do it.
Yeah. We used to have about an 8-minute attention span. So we would say you could talk for about 8 minutes and then you have to at least have the kids turn and talk or answer questions or something. Now it's much shorter. It's much shorter. Our ability to engage and we're so scattered. So maybe you're teaching fractions, but kids are also probably paying attention to something else. It's they call it the second screen effect. So here's something new for you. Netflix, when they are now planning their launches, they aren't making shows as intricate or as, I don't know if I want to use the word smart, as they used to
Not
be.
as heavy, not as in depth.
Because what they realized is our TV's our second screen.
Which is true.
Because what are we paying attention to?
Our
phones. So when, if you've ever watched a show where you're like, oh God, I got to rewind.
Yes.
What just happened? They want to avoid that. Okay. So they're making shows as easy as possible because that's second screen. So to some extent, we really weren't prepared for the onslaught and the connectivity that kids have with other devices. And even if we are a device-free zone, it's so ingrained in their brains. They're still thinking about that. Like, I think yesterday, Denise touched her sticky notes. Like
Thinking it was her phone.
Thinking it was her phone.
Yes.
So if we're second screen, that means we really have to up the intelligence and the engagement strategies that we use with kids. And I think we do a disservice when we aren't able to provide some of those strategies to teachers. Because again, college readiness is usually very content heavy. It's not management, it's not necessarily engagement heavy. And they still to this day like to tell teachers, well, that's just something you gotta learn as you go.
Yeah.
Don't do that. You can pre-plan, just like you can do a lesson plan. You can plan for behaviors so that you go, I'm going to teach this, but here's how we're going to get it done. There's no way to separate them out. And if I'm in high school and I've got a bunch of kids who are not at grade level on reading, I am going to have to put accommodations into my lesson plan, not modifications. We're not going to change where we want them to be, but accommodations so that they can get there.
Right.
You have to adjust.
Yeah. You said you can plan. I would even say like you must.
You must.
Because they're like what I find myself saying or thinking a lot is not a lot of good things happen on the fly. Because you're stuck in like reactive mode, right?
Some interesting
You've
things
got
happen.
to interesting. Not always, getting it to your target.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the way we want
Not
to learn.
goal oriented,
But
you gotta plan. It's a must.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what's often missing though when we work with instructors and we go, well, you have to plan. What's the resource that we're missing?
Like a
I'm gonna
mechanism
make a
to
guess.
be able to plan for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do we need? Even with the mechanisms, like whether it's a format or
Like
A
a
system.
curriculum, a system.
oh
Well,
no, it's easier
perspective.
than that.
Clarity and knowing what's gonna.
God,
what
you
could
guys are
happen.
just, they're way too
I
smart.
read
Way
your-
too
oh my
smart.
God.
They're
Are we
way too smart.
overthinking
You're overthinking it. Time.
Oh, well,
Oh.
yes, absolutely.
That's something we all need
Time.
all the time.
Yes.
we were like, oh God, it's a quiz.
No, it's time. That's
You're
it.
not
It's
doing
time.
a good job.
Fidelity.
Y'all are like, is it a pedagogy? And no, it's just time.
That's funny. Yeah.
Like even
Absolutely.
when we do classroom management trainings, and for those of you that are implementing CHAMPS, and maybe you were one of the first groups, and you're like, okay, I've got to make a visual. And then nobody gave you time to make a visual, and everybody's turning on that laminator at the same time, and that's why the next time you have a staff meeting, everybody's sitting there cutting out letters because they're trying to figure out where to get time. If something is important,
Yeah.
you have to create time as a resource to get that thing done. So you can't say these 19 things are important, but we're not going to give you time to do it. Because inevitably, I'm going to let something fall. And professional development alone isn't effective at making change happen, right? I always tell people I'm the weakest. I really am the weakest part of this. Because all I do is give you information, but it's the application that has to happen. So this is why you guys are vital. Right. Your campus coaches, your campus or your staff student liaisons,
PBIS liaisons too.
PBIS liaisons. They're so critical because we were able to show definitively that professional development that has no tie to coaching will inevitably fail. Because within a week, remember, what does everybody's retention rate drop to?
50, 20.
20%. We leave with one good idea.
Right.
But professional development that is tied to system design, where administrators are doing regular trend data checks. Campus coaches are doing trend data checks where they're not reporting, individual teachers. They're saying, these are the trends. To inform our practice as leaders, what do we need to do? Because a lot of teachers are struggling with it. And if one or two teachers are struggling with it, we tie it to coaching so they get more intense professional development.
Right.
And we can show that that's what sticks. So if you have PD and it's not tied to any kind of support, any kind of tier 1 system design,
Right.
I will tell you right now, it's not going to have the power you think it is.
Right.
And so you have to tie it to
To make it
human
work within
support.
the system, using the resources you have.
Yeah. You
and
have to create
follow up
tier
and
1.
follow through, but then support to make sure it happens, right? So we're going to take a quick check. This is where we pause and we get people some little reinforcement for listening to the podcast.
Oh.
So what are they going to email, Lindsay?
Email studentsportservices@conroeisd.net.
Code word.
Code word? Or do we want
What's the code word?
Safe and
Do like
you don't want it to be Tricia. You don't
No,
feel
that's
like you're
weird.
special.
No,
all
that's
right, Tricia. What should they email for a prize? Ooh.
Make it a fun word.
amalgamation.
Amalgamation.
Love it.
Yes, and you might want to Google how to spell
Let me
Amalgamation.
break that down for you. Oh, spelling bee. AMALGAMATION.
Yes, amalgamation.
Amalgamation.
Anytime you see people sound out words, that's how you know none of us are as smart as we think we are. To this day, I've got to go A, B, C, D, E, F,
Yeah,
G.
absolutely.
I count on my fingers. It's
I do too.
Oh, yes.
right. Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to it, we have a heavy question.
Oh boy.
But
Great.
it's really not. But it is. But we can make light of this. Okay, so you have the opportunity of traveling all around. Like you're traveling, Tricia, right?
Yeah.
So, we have one little perspective here within our area, Houston ISD, Connor ISD, all of our surrounding districts. And a lot of our teachers have served in a lot of different, surrounding districts. But with you being able to go around and see a bunch of things in a short period of time, the state of education today.
That's just like a tiny
long
topic.
is this
It's
podcast?
supposed to be 30
My
minutes.
Lord.
So it
State of
sounds
education.
so serious, but really, the thing we hear is behavior is on the rise.
Yes.
And so, is that just our perception, or is that something that you've seen? What's your
reality.
take on that?
Oh boy.
Behavior is on the rise. These kids aren't like they used to be.
Please remember, I have no definitive research
Well, no, but we
to
just-
pull from my
Yeah.
head to back this up. So the question is yes and no.
Okay.
Okay. Is that it?
I
Are
like
we
answers
done?
that aren't answers.
I
I
like
like that.
to elaborate just a tiny bit. just a little
Sure.
bit.
Okay. So, especially post-COVID, we've had quite an increase in absenteeism for a couple of reasons. Again, going back to engagement, if kids were out of school, and this, by the way, COVID is just one example. You've got in different areas like California, when they have wildfires, they have kids out for a significant amount of time.
Right.
If you have any kind of natural disaster, you have kids out. This is just one
Hurricanes.
time
Floods.
where it impacted a lot
Right.
of people. And if kids were just as successful when they weren't there as when they were, what was the incentive to go back?
Right.
And again, when I say I was probably a tier 3 kid, I'm talking about I was truant my junior year of high school for anxiety. Supposedly I have high functioning anxiety, but I think that depends on the day. And I don't know anyone in education right now who doesn't have high
I was
functioning
thinking,
anxiety.
me too.
Me too.
And so there's a lot of things we did to create system design before COVID that we forgot to bring back after COVID. So that's part of it, is just we got lax on system design. So it seems like behavior is on the rise, but it's the same behavior. We just didn't put some preventative measures back where they needed to be. Now, the second thing that we need to be aware of too is earlier when I said I was hired and there were like 200, over 200 applicants for my job.
Right.
And this was back in the day where to get the job, they were like, can you coach basketball and track and volleyball and cheerleading? And you're like, yes, I can. I'll do whatever you want. But now there's a shortage. And part of that actually speaks to the success of public education. Because we went all through the 90s and aughts telling kids, you can be whatever you choose to be. Well, even in the 80s, a significant number, especially of women, went into two fields, education and
Right.
bonus if you know the other one.
Nursing.
Nursing, education and nursing. So we built up. Everyone was so successful. They're like, well, I'm going to be, a rocket scientist. I'm going to be and they weren't coming into the field of education. So we created a shortage, even though the attrition rate is approximately the same. And a lot of times we will attribute, especially young teachers leaving because of behavior management, but it's because we haven't created a system for their success as well.
Right.
And so our pool is smaller, and that doesn't necessarily mean our pool is worse, but we're not preparing them as well.
Yeah.
And because there's such a shortage, we're also pulling people in from other occupations.
Right.
And things like Teach for America, and I know there's other, and I've met fantastic educators through that process. But it's hard to just throw in an expert, you can be an expert in a thing and not be very good at instruction. And again, if we don't give people the time to hone their craft, then we're doing a disservice. So part of it is just the way that we have designed prepping our teachers hasn't changed, even though the people who are in the field have changed.
Yeah, I really appreciate. I've never thought of the perspective of that before. It's not that we're failing; it's that education is working, and the people went and did
Too well.
People went and did all the things they said that they were going to be when they grow up.
Yeah.
And now they're doing that, which wasn't a teacher in all circumstances, which the world goes round. We need all the people. But thinking of the progress that we've made over the years, that progress only happens because of the progress we made possible.
Right.
That's awesome.
Right.
Oh, look, it's not all doom and gloom.
I know.
Thanks, Tricia.
Well, I mean, public education is kind of getting beat
heavy.
up right now.
Yeah.
And I always look at it and I'm like, I go, I don't understand what we're using. Yeah, okay, so if you're seeing data on the rise, we can't just sit there and go, well, it's kids, data's on the rise. Well, then do something.
Yes,
Right.
what are you gonna do
Like,
about it?
we have system design. It's not like it's impossible to do. You just have to give people the time to do it and do it well.
Right.
You can't just say, we have a problem and here's a resource, but not give people a way
Yeah.
to connect the resource to the problem.
Could you do a favor for me real quick?
I will 100% do it.
Okay, I think this is a good way to kind of wrap up maybe the conversation.
Okay.
So you've mentioned, we know what you're talking about when you
gosh.
say system design.
Yes.
Right. Not everybody listening to this podcast has gotten the opportunity to sit with you over the last few days and contemplate system design in education. It's not usually something people think about when they think of education. Can you tell us the story of the elephant?
Oh, wow. And it's not even my story. It's Dan and Chip Heath's story.
Well, will you share their story
will
at this
100%
table
Give them credit.
today?
You gave them
100%.
credit.
Yeah, credit where credit is due.
And you know, when I'm on airplanes, and I think I told you guys this, sometimes I don't get my AirPods in soon enough, or the problem with AirPods is people don't know they're in, and some people are very chatty. And I actually have a shirt that says, please don't talk to me, but sometimes I don't wear it. And, you know, hi, how are you? Where are you from? What do you do for a living? And I go, I'm a systems analyst. And that is usually boring enough. There are no follow-up questions, which is what I'm after. But if they go, oh, what do you mean by that? And I go, well, I work with states and districts and campuses and classrooms to design a system where 90% of the people within that system, both educators and admin and students, are doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're achieving. That's what I do. And in order to really understand system design, not only do you have the variables, which many of you know that Stoic framework, but you have to also have a kind of a visual of what that looks like. So Dan and Chip Heath, I think, did a lovely job of talking through the 3 things you need to address in system design. And he calls it the rider, the elephant, and the path. So the rider is us. It's the smart people. Well, depending on the day. It's the people who get the ideas and are like, yes, this is what we need to do. We absolutely need to get it done. But you also have to entice the elephant, because the rider's on the elephant. And it doesn't matter how excited the rider is if the elephant doesn't want to go anywhere. And the elephant is, are we emotionally attached enough that we feel a sense of urgency without overwhelm? So we have to feel like there's a reason we are doing this. It can't just be, well, we're doing this because the district said
Right.
Yes.
we had to sit through this. I've got to take a drink. You can edit that out.
This is a good time to just process.
So what speaks to the heart of educators? And so, for example, a 9th grade team in a school in St. Louis, they hypothesized that probably 50% of their kids were reading below grade level. So when we did a quick check, it was over 90% of their kids based on some reading benchmarks that we looked at. And yet the district is poor enough that they were just taking 11th grade textbooks, and when 11th grade would adopt new, they would send those textbooks down. So a significant portion of those 9th graders, not only were they below grade level, they were 4 or more grade levels below. And then that made it 6 or more grade levels below. And so, and this, by the way, I think in education, this should be part of our new system design. every teacher is a reading teacher. Every teacher is a reading teacher. Every subject area, for those of you who are in elementary, is a reading opportunity. Those, just like behavior and academics go together, reading should be at the core of what we're doing. But that means we have to train people in how to create reading strategies within science and social studies, etc. Well, the school was not having it. They were like, this isn't our problem. This was the middle school's problem, right? If the middle school would have just got them, why are we doing this? If kids aren't old enough to read, we're just going to get through that content. We're going to go to the end. And it wasn't until we audio recorded a student reading that textbook, and then we played it in the staff meeting. And it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. So you have to feel a personal connection to why you want to move forward. That's your elephant. You can have all the tools.
Right.
But if you're not...
You can have the time.
Yeah. But if there's not something within you
Right.
that believes you need to do this, and that's what anybody in education, to be blunt, you have to believe in education.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't have the time for people to not believe in what we're doing. Because that's just getting in the way. It's just getting in the way. And that's the path.
Right.
So you have the rider and the elephant, but you have a path and there's debris in it. Your job as coaches is to clear the debris. When you're in a leadership position, you clear the debris. So you get the elephant moving and you give the rider the tools they need, and then you get everything else out of the way. And I don't have time, and education doesn't have time for people who are throwing debris onto the path. And when you find people who are throwing debris onto the path, you should say, this sounds like debris. I need this cleared.
This sounds like debris.
It sounds like debris.
Yeah? I like a good one.
We
Liner.
don't have time.
Don't be debris.
Well, it sounds better than
Yes.
this sounds like, and then you can fill that in.
Well,
with a
yes.
lot of
I
things.
mean, they wouldn't know what the heck I'm talking
This
about.
sounds like debris. So we're clearing it out.
So,
Yes.
we said hang in there for why Lucy's sitting at the table today and why she's going to be at the table. So, Lindsay, you have some news to share with our podcast crew.
Yes. So I am not coming back next year. I am going to spend the year with my daughter. It's her last year before kindergarten. But thank you so much for letting me live my dream of being a podcaster.
We are going to miss you.
Thank you. I'll miss you.
You want to, I know you love your cup, but can you pass your cup over to Lucy? This is like a little ritualistic moment.
Like, don't drink out of it. It's not
Passing of the cup.
I will cherish it forever. Bailey, cheers.
Thank you
Okay.
guys. This
Well,
is beautiful.
You
did great.
Thank you
Man,
so much
this
for
is
being a
lovely.
part of this with us today.
Oh no, the pleasure was truly all mine.
Well, look, we really appreciate it. We know that the way that we always close out our podcast is to share, like, what was our one thing or what was our takeaway. So I'll let you share first. Even though you talked, you did all. What's your takeaway?
I know.
No,
Man,
that's
I
what
talked
it's
about too
supposed
much.
to be.
Oh.
But do you have a takeaway from today?
Well, my takeaway is the look in your eyes when I said what's missing.
That's funny.
And, you know, I was just talking time, but you listed a whole bunch of other things. And so my takeaway is that bunch of other things, sometimes that's unique to districts. And I forget sometimes to mine for those reasons deeply enough. And a lot of professional developers will come with, this is, you know, what we're presenting. And we try to get to all of that, but sometimes we miss it. And it's a good reminder to dig a little bit deeper into some of the intricacies that are unique to Conroe. So when you email and say, there's an amalgamation of issues, and I think it would be great to get that kind of feedback.
Absolutely. And we're open to it always.
Yes.
Definitely welcome, because that's our job,
Yeah.
is to help clear debris.
You're just clearing the debris. What's getting in your way?
All right,
Bailey?
move that elephant. My takeaway is, I think, the elephant and the debris, and it's actually no, I changed that because that was my takeaway yesterday, and here I am walking into the conversation with the same takeaway. That ain't fair. My takeaway,
Well, you just doubled down. It's going to move into your it's long-term storage.
repetition.
faster.
My takeaway is rethinking or reframing the frustration that we feel in education and feeling like, is there any hope? You know, because that can be kind of dramatic with my inner thoughts. But reframing is important, and I think that I finally found a way to reframe it for myself, so thank you. That will help me sleep better at night.
So that's lovely.
Yeah, for real. I made that. I made it.
That's why we're giddy about you.
Wow.
Okay, so actually, and thinking, and I heard you say the story yesterday about the elephant, but as I'm sitting here and really listening to it, I think in coaching it would help me to ask somebody, like, what's your why, and try to get them to feel, that connection and understanding that these kids, they don't want to misbehave. There's a reason that it's happening, and maybe it's because they don't have the capability to even understand this. Yeah. And to put that into more perspective, like, it's not a personal thing, and try to help them understand, like, 'cause we say that all the time, but when you're living in it, it feels personal, right?
It does.
But to just show them, like, this is probably why this is happening, and, this kid's struggling, and let's help them. And, like, reframing that thinking from they're a problem, they, it's just personal, and they want to be bad, into, there's a struggle happening. How can we help this?
Right. So. Well, all behavior serves a purpose, right? And any behavior that's repeated is being reinforced in some way. And the heartbreaking part of this is, yes, we're successful, but also our systems are designed to get exactly what we're getting. Right. And so that's why we have to return to, we need to prepare the people in the systems. Right. Yep. Because if I feel empowered, then I am much more likely to make change happen. And I'm much more likely to understand I can affect that kid, and I want to go back to my core why. Because people don't go into education for the money and fame.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So even asking what we did at the beginning, I, came into education for, X.
Mine is to slow down and understand that just because I have an emotional connection, the other person may not have it. And for the sake of time, sometimes we rush as coaches because we want to get to the next person. So slow down, make sure that we have the same emotional connection, or that there is one. And most importantly, when things get hard, not becoming the debris. To be honest.
Oh, don't become the debris.
Oh, I love that.
So, we got a little shape shifting going on in your
I sense a t-shirt in the future.
Don't become debris. Because if you are debris, we either need to
be the debris.
Clear to another path.
So because you go slow to go
deep.
Far.
There you go.
Not fast.
Close.
You go far or deep.
So close. You go slow to go far. I don't know how fast got.
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh,
I thought, I'm not
it,
smart enough to understand. Maybe
strike against you.
You know who says that all the time? Jess Winkler.
Thank you so much for being here. It has been lovely.
Yes.
You're a knowledge fountain, a fountain of knowledge.
Yes.
And the way that you present is like we're having a conversation, so it makes it meaningful, and you're kind of like our little behavior hero.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We were so excited for you to be here.
Did you make a shirt for me that says
we're
behavior?
planning it, actually.
I'll wear that on the plane.
We did. It didn't get here in time.
You'll definitely get questions then. Don't do that.
So remember, podcast people, if you ever have an idea or question about what you've heard, feel free to ask your student support services coach. Also, if you have a question but not want to remain anonymous, you can always ask Sam. Their contact link can be found in our monthly newsletter. Student Support Services newsletter. All submissions are completely anonymous. Well, Lucy, you want to do the cheers? Your first cheer. Well, second now.
Second.
Cheers.
Cheers. Lindsay, you will be missed. Thank you for participating.